People look at you today, 20 years later, and they still have no idea what you're about. Tell me in a sentence who you are.
Nobody. I'm nobody. I'm a tramp, a bum, a hobo. I'm a boxcar and a jug of wine. And a straight racer if you get too close to me.
Charles Mills Maddox, better known as Charles Manson, was born on November 12, 1934, in Ashland, Kentucky, the son of Ada Kathleen Maddox. Ada Kathleen Maddox was 15 years old when she became a mother. Charles Manson's biological father was identified as Colonel Walker Henderson Scott, whom Kathleen Maddox sued for custody in 1937. Henderson Scott worked at the local mills at various times and was known in his community as a con man. Scott deceived Kathleen Maddox and told her that he was an Army colonel. However, colonel was only the name he was given. Scott and Kathleen Maddox had an affair for some time, and Kathleen was pregnant. When Kathleen told Scott that she was pregnant, he told her that she had been called up for Army duty. After a few months, Kathleen realized that Scott was lying, that he had deceived her, that he was not coming back. Charles Manson never knew his biological father. In August 1934, before Charles Manson was born, his mother Kathleen Maddox married William Eugene Manson. However, this marriage was not to last long. Kathleen Maddox, with her brother Luther Elbert Maddox, was often in entertainment venues and inappropriate settings, leaving Charles alone with nannies. Maddox and her husband divorced on April 30, 1937. Charles continued to use William's last name, Manson. On August 1, 1939, Kathleen and her brother Luther were arrested for assault and robbery and sentenced to 5 and 10 years in prison, respectively. Charles Manson had a difficult childhood and youth. He tried to burn down the school when he was 9 years old, committed his first known robbery when he was 14, stole an automobile when he was 21, and went to prison for forging checks at 25. In 1967, the hippie movement was spreading rapidly. Charles Manson had been in prison for about 10 years for crimes such as pimping women and forging checks, and he was released from prison after completing his sentence. While in prison, Charles Manson listened to the Beatles, was inspired by them, and wanted to be a singer like them. He changed his style to catch the hippie movement. He grew his hair and beard. His new image made him look impressive. Charles Manson took his guitar and started singing in the streets. Charles Manson was happy with the attention he was getting. Charles Manson's listeners were usually people who had been ostracized by society and who did not have good family relations. They started to see Charles Manson as a leader for them, and they took this admiration to different levels and formed a community called the Manson family. This community was growing over time, but they had no financial resources. They had information about the Spahn Ranch in Los Angeles. The Spahn Ranch was actually a movie set. Old cowboy movies were filmed here. Charles Manson and his fans thought this ranch was a good place to stay, and the owner of the ranch gave them permission to stay on the ranch. Charles Manson didn't really like his fans, but he needed them to keep his life going. Charles Manson and his fans got the basic food they needed to live by eating the leftovers from a nearby supermarket. Over time, Charles Manson began to test the people around him to see how devoted they were to him. The community, which called itself a family, followed Charles Manson's orders unconditionally. Manson wanted them to break into houses in the neighborhood and steal. The unconditional fulfillment of everything he wanted by his fans satisfied Manson's ego. While his fans were committing various crimes for him, Manson continued to work on his music on the ranch. Manson went to various music producers and wanted to work on an album, but he didn't get the attention he expected because he wanted everything to go his way. Charles Manson, who was deified by the fans he lived with on the farm, did not like the fact that the music companies did not want to work with him. He thought there was injustice in the music industry and wanted revenge. On July 26, 1969, Manson family members Robert Beausoleil, Susan Atkins and Mary Bruner went to Gary Hillman's house in Topanga Canyon. Gary was a music teacher, but Gary and Manson had a dirty relationship, and Gary owed Manson money. 3 men came to Gary's house and asked Gary to give them the money, but Gary told them he didn't have it. The 3 men called Manson, who was waiting for them at the Spawn Ranch, and told him that Gary told them he didn't have the money. Manson and his best man, Bruce Davids, went to Gary's house together. Manson had a big sword with him. When Manson got home, he slashed Gary in the face. This was a warning to get the money. But when they didn't get the money, Manson told them to end Gary's life. After the incident, Gary's friends who could not reach Gary came to Gary's house. Before they got inside the house, a bad odor was spreading outside. When they entered the house, they encountered Gary's lifeless body. Detectives who arrived at the scene found a cut on Gary's face extending from his face to his ear, and stab wounds on his chest. Gary's lifeless body was found lying on his back and covered with a blanket. There was also the words, "Politic Piggy," written on the wall of the room where the body was found. Manson told Robert Beausoleil to end Gary's life and make it look like the black revolutionaries had committed the crime. The drawing on the wall was a symbol of a black community called the Black Panthers, founded in 1966. This group opposed racism against black people. Manson's plan was to cause a riot among people. Manson did this because of an ideology he believed in. Manson, Helter Skelter, was an apocalyptic vision. It was based on an apocalyptic war between black and white people. The country was in a state of turmoil, and tensions between people were high. Manson and his family began to act with the perverse idea of declaring their leadership after the chaos. But Helter Skelter was actually a song by the Beatles. Manson, who was not in a good psychological state, began to interpret these songs differently. When he listened to the song Helter Skelter, Manson interpreted it as a warning of an impending race war and began to believe that the 4 members of the Beatles were the 4 angels mentioned in the New Testament. According to Manson, the songs contained special secret messages sent to his followers. Shortly after the violent incident, on August 6, 1969, Robert Beausoleil was caught by the police asleep in the car they had stolen belonging to Gary Hillman. The knife used in the crime and other suspicious items were found in the car. When Manson heard that Robert Beausoleil had been caught, he didn't know what to do. If Robert told what they were doing, they would not be able to carry out the Helter Skelter movement. Manson ordered a select few members of the group to take their guns and knives and dress in black. Preparing, Tex Watson, Linda Kasabian, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Susan Atkins set out to carry out a new act. Manson told them that he wanted it to be loud, dirty, and violent, the likes of which had never been seen before. On August 9th, the team Manson ordered went to Cielo in the Venetian Canyon. They got out of the car to enter a large mansion with Hollywood actors and began their gruesome plan. Inside the mansion were Abigail Folger, Jay Sebring, Sherion Tate, and Wojciech Frykowski. Outside was a young man named Stephen Parent. Stephen, who wanted to go out in his car in the evening, was the first target of the Manson family group, who were making wild plans outside. Stephen was killed in the car by an armed attack by members of the group. Tex Watson, after checking the surroundings, infiltrated the mansion and opened the door to his friends waiting for him outside. When the group entered, they woke up Wojciech Frykowski, who had woken up on the couch, and took him hostage. One by one, Susan Atkins went through the other rooms and gathered the occupants together. Everyone in the mansion had been taken hostage. Tex Watson first ended the life of Jay Sebring. Wojciech Frykowski, who witnessed the incident, tried to escape with his hands tied, but was stabbed at the entrance of the mansion before he could escape. Abigail Folger took the confusion as an opportunity and tried to escape the room. However, he was caught in the garden of the mansion and died from multiple stab wounds. Wojciech Frykowski, who was wounded, tried to call for help but died from 51 stab wounds. The only hostage to survive was Sherion Tate. Sherion was 8 months pregnant. But it didn't matter to Susan Atkins. Susan attacked Sherian with a knife, and Sherian died with her baby in her belly. A total of 6 people died on the night of August 9th. The 4 victims in the house had a total of 102 stab wounds. After the atrocity, Susan Atkins wrote "P.I.G." on the door of the mansion with Sherian Tate's blood and left. The brutalized group had no plans to stop their actions. On August 10th, 1969, supermarket manager Leno LaBianca and his wife Rosemary died after being attacked in their home in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles. In the house where the incident took place, "Death to Pig" was written on the wall, and "Helter Skelter" was falsely written on the refrigerator. About 2 months had passed since the events, and the band members were happy and amused that their actions were in the news. But on October 12th, Charles Manson was arrested again for car theft. But the police did not yet know that he was connected to the atrocities. Susan Atkins, who was being held for something other than the atrocities they had committed, bragged to her friend in prison about how happy she was that they had committed the atrocities they had committed. She talked about what she had done and what she... On July 24th, 1970, the trial process for Charles Manson and the Manson family began as it was revealed how the atrocities had occurred. Linda Kasabian, who had participated in one of the events as a member of the crew and later escaped from the crew, was granted immunity because she was a witness against the members of the group. Charles Manson gives a long defense in the dummy court. However, his demeanor in court revealed him to be a troubled man, a man of twisted thinking. Charles Manson was tried as the instigator of all the crimes. On January 25, 1971, the court decided to end the lives of all the defendants, but due to a change in the law, all the defendants were sentenced to prison. All the atrocities were actually the product of Charles Manson's own perverted thoughts. The pig, written on the walls, was again a quote from the Beatles. The band criticized the upper class in their song Piggies. That's why Charles Manson called the people he targeted pig.